Is 4 minutes enough to discuss all the beauty in the bloodshed?
Yes, I'll give it a go.
Carry on.
Oscar nominated just early on in the week, a documentary by Laura Poitras, who won an Oscar before for Citizen4. The subject this time round is photographer and campaigner Nan Goldin. And the documentary intertwines stories of her life from childhood, the trauma of losing her sister, her life photographing people on the fringes of society, mounting a show about people living with AIDS, and then it intertwines that with her later campaign against the Sackler family, who were the sponsors of the art world, but also whose OxyContin fueled the opioid crisis. Here's a clip.
100,000 dead! 100,000 dead!
There's the Sackler family of the art world, the museum world, and philanthropy. And then there's the big pharma marketing and addiction and death.
My anger at the Sackler family, it's personal. When you think of the profit of people's pain, you can only be furious.
So Goldin describes herself as having survived the opioid crisis because she was prescribed opioids. And she then started prescription addiction intervention, now PAIN, to take on the Sackler family, who are these kind of, big players in the art world, huge sort of, philanthropists, I think is the word that they would like. And there's a bit which she said, I asked, will my career implode if I do this? And she was told, yeah, probably will. But what the documentary does is it takes films of the protests, which are almost like art installations, like people turning up at the museums and, falling apparently dead on the floor, holding these bottles that they've made, which are, so it's like a kind of agitprop art installation that really caught the press's attention. And the way in which Laura Poitras does it, there's a real kind of edge of, almost like a kind of thriller edge to these things. And it's really, really well done, really, really gripping. She got the National Portrait Gallery not to take the Sackler money. Then others followed suit. We follow it onto the campaign, goes to the Louvre. But what you discover about her is that it was always the case that she was campaigning, that she was sort of working to change the status quo. We hear her say, there's some heartbreaking things. She says, my mother and father were not equipped to be parents, and that is a whole strand of the story which is really moving. How photography gave her a voice, her embrace of queer culture and what that brought to her. She says at one point, my roommates were running away from America and they found each other. She became friends with the John Waters gang, the people from the John Waters movies. Talks about sex work, very frankly, photographs of herself. She had documented herself and her own sexual relationships, and photographs of herself having been battered. This is very, very personal, very kind of, raw and open work. This extraordinary exhibition of people living with AIDS. At one point, their work, the work got an exhibition into trouble, the AIDS exhibition. And I thought it was really enlivening company. I knew very, very little about Nan Goldin. I heard the name, but I didn't really know much about her work at all. She says at one point, the wrong things are kept secret by people. And that phrase really stuck with me. Because really what the whole documentary is about exposing things, putting things out on display, not keeping things secret, whether it's to do with things to do with the family or things to do with the sort of greater political world. And watching the agitprop stuff was really kind of enlivening, particularly since in the course of the narrative, she does take on this huge institution and actually does manage to achieve an awful lot. So I thought it was a really interesting documentary. It's called All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, and it's by Laura Poitras. If you're a regular listener, you will have heard that name before, just nominated for Best Documentary at the Oscars.
And does that have a general cinematic release, do you think?
Yes, and the fact that it's just got nominated for an Oscar, this is, when people say what are awards for, they are to, from the distributor's point of view, that's an absolute godsend. Yeah. They literally just got nominated for Best Documentary.
And if you have access to Disney+, the drama series Dope Sick, you may well have seen, but it's really worth catching up on. It's a similar
subject.
It's all about the Sacklers. Thanks very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as we enjoyed making it. While you're here, check out all the other videos because they're cool too, aren't they?
Yeah, and if you want to keep up to date with everything Kermode and Mayo's take, then check out our social channels.
Why wouldn't you?
I would. I have done.
Excellent.